Welcome to the Inside Out Money Podcast.
Can't even recognize this place. Too many pieces of our past mistakes.
Hi, I'm Maggie, and I believe real change starts from the inside out. So let's work together to improve our money and our lives from the inside out. We will explore all things money and our relationship with it. Join me each week with a rotating set of co-hosts, friends, and interviews. Let's jump in.
It's time, we going round and round and round and round and round.
Hey, Andrew.
Hey, Maggie.
We're back for another case study episode.
I know, it feels like we just did this.
I know, it does. And you know why we're back, right?
Why?
Because we got some pretty good feedback from that episode.
Nice.
So yeah, I got some good feedback from our first case study episode. It was a little bit of an experiment. It was your idea, but I liked it. And so we did it. We got a ton of submissions. We did the first two about a month ago, and we got some really good feedback. The data supported it, but the data is always a little hard to read. But also we anecdotally just got like comments from many listeners because we put at the beginning of that episode, let us know what you think of this type. And many people said they really liked it. They liked the variety of like different style cases that we chose. And so we've got more variety for you tonight. And yeah, the feedback was very good. So we're not going to do this like every month, but we'll do some of these. We'll mix them in. And for now we're on a roll. So we'll do 2 more case studies for you tonight.
Great. In terms of episode rankings, how am I still at the top?
Let me see, Andrew. I see what you're focused on. You're very competitive, you know?
Yeah, I always have to make sure I'm number one.
Very competitive cyclist. Well, the case study episode is not number one yet because there's a lot of a lot of people download like not the freshest episode and go back and listen to old episodes. So you need a little bit of like length of time also mixed in there. But your episode is still number one, which is episode 22, How Much You Need to Retire, Flaws in the 4% Rule. Still the most listened to Inside Out Money episode.
That was a very good title though, too. I will give you some title credit on that.
Yeah, I can't remember if I named that one. I might have. Okay. Then number 2 is the Liz episode, Die With Zero. Number 3 is one with Greg, Surprising Truths of Early Retirement. Number 4 is Liz. Number 5 is Erica and I. No. Who did Financial Regrets? Was that me and you?
Yeah, that was
You're
us.
5. Erica used to have one in the top 4. She's in the top 10.
Okay. It's
Couple.
good.
Yeah. There's a good variety, but you're still number 1. So do you feel better now?
Yes.
Okay.
Always.
We'll continue.
Thank you.
We'll carry on. Okay.
Pat myself on the back.
Yeah, good job. I'm going to virtually pat you. So our first case study tonight, we're just going to jump right in. I'm going to read all the background for you. We've got Samson and Delilah. I didn't make up those names. That was their made up names. I like when people provide me their own fake names. They are 70 and 71 years old. I'm excited because I get questions from older people sometimes. I'm not even saying that's older, to be clear. It's just older than me and older than Andrew.
Right.
But we don't talk as much about finances and sort of,
we definitely talk a lot more about early retirement, early and mid-retirement, not necessarily traditional retirement here on this show.
So this will be a fun one. They live in Florida. Their annual household spending is about $85,000 a year. Their annual income is about $126,000 a year, which is pretty cool because it's all coming from like pensions and Social Security. It's kind of cool. It's kind of fun for me being in my 40s to see what it might look like to have all of my expenses covered by some version of like an IRA and Social Security. So their net worth is about $700,000. I'm going to give you some kind of highlights from it. They've got about $200,000 equity in their home. Okay, so they've got about $240,000 in some regular IRAs. They've got about, I'm just doing some rough estimates. They got about $40,000 in their Roth IRAs. They've got cars that are worth about $50,000. They've got an annuity for about $11,000. They've got about $100,000, I believe, in cash and various kind of savings accounts. And that overall net worth of like assets minus liabilities, their only liabilities, their mortgage, they've got about almost $700,000 in assets. They also have 2 life insurance policies. And this is relevant to one of their questions. Keep in mind, they're 70 and 71. They have a life insurance policy for him at $125,000 and for her at $150,000. And they pay about $100 a month. So about $1,200 a year for those 2 policies. They also, this is the cool part, their pensions are, he gets about $3,200 a month from a pension. She gets about $3,300 a month from a pension. He gets about $1,700 in Social Security, and she gets about $1,600 in Social Security.
And to clarify, these were state pensions.
So that is almost exactly 10 grand a month that they are receiving in a combination of their pensions and Social Security. So 4 different payments, 2 each. And they also pay for a dental plan for about $27 a month. It's a pretty good deal. I should look into a dental plan if I could get it for $27 a month through American Express. Okay, side note, I'm going to look into that myself. And I thought it was pretty cool that they're bringing in 10 grand a month.
Absolutely.
Again, that when you go back to what we said as a reminder, they're bringing in about $126,000 before taxes, and their household spending is about $85,000. So they're bringing in more than they are spending.
And just a note on it, the way I like to look at this is I like to look at the opposite way to say, okay, how much assets would they have needed to have if they were pulling from that to generate this income? So excluding Social Security, they're doing about $6,500 a month just from the pensions. And so $6,500 a month times 12 gets you to $78,000 a year. Multiply that by 25 times for 4%. That's $2 million, 1.95.
Yeah, that's a cool way of thinking about it.
That's
the equivalent of them having $2 million sitting in assets that they were.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct. And so it just shows you how valuable any type of income is in retirement, and to have it in pensions, it just shows you how much less assets you need, and how valuable those pensions can be, and why they are not so popular anymore.
Well, Andrew, to your point too, though, people are always asking, like, how much do I need to retire? That's a very hard question to answer because everyone's kind of asset package and financial package looks different. Some people have a really healthy pension like the two of them have. Some people don't. So they need to have the $2 million in perhaps brokerage accounts or something else that's more liquid. And then some people have a really awesome pension and don't need as much saved up.
And then the other beauty of the pension is you don't have that longevity risk, right? These pensions typically pay out for life. And so it's like Social Security, and you don't have to worry. You know you're going to get $10,000 deposited in your account every single month, right? You can live a very nice lifestyle in Florida on a tax-free state, right? On 10 grand a month.
Yeah. Okay, so here's a little more info and then their questions for us. So they both retired at 62, so about 8-9 years ago, with state pensions and Social Security. We own 2 cars that are paid for in full. This is the best part. Our children are both college graduates, married, and have flown the coop. And yes, we paid for both their weddings and helped with college. That's awesome. I mostly love that they're like college graduates and flown the coop. It sounds like they're supporting themselves, and so they don't need to worry about that piece. They've already taken care of that stuff.
You and I both look forward to those years.
We do. I just keep my fingers crossed that they will be happy.
Actually,
I just want them to be happy, but I'd like them to fly the coop also.
Yeah.
Yes. We take 2 vacations a year, 1 international and 1 domestic, and a few road trips. Their only debt is their mortgage. We built a new, smaller home in Florida when we retired and have a 15-year mortgage at 2.75%, which should be paid off in about 5 more years, and we send $1,000 extra for principal monthly. We save $1,000 monthly in a sinking fund and another $1,000 monthly in an emergency fund. We are disciplined with our finances, but splurge on eating out, a cleaning lady, and tithe 10% to our church. We lift weights as a couple and have a balanced life with family and friends. Medical bills have increased because my hubby has had some health issues in 2024, and I'm laser focused on paying our mortgage because if something happens to him, his pension and Social Security end at the time of death. Same if I die before him.
Which is a very interesting aspect.
Yes, so, you're right. That changes what you even just said about the $2 million.
Correct. So that is the positive of the pension is that it goes for life. The negative is that it goes for life, right? And you don't have that asset base. And so that is it's an interesting dynamic to say my income would be cut in half if my partner
for either person,
passes away, right?
Yeah. So you want to build a cushion to cover that.
Yeah.
And honestly, even the life insurance wouldn't really cover that, which we'll talk about. So here are their specific questions for us. Delilah was very focused in her questions. All our retirement investments were set up during our working years at our workplace, so they invested for us. Therefore, we do not have a clue on whether or not we should invest rather than save in a high-yield savings account at our age. And if yes, what's the safest place to invest and how do we start? Also, each of our term life policies for $150,000 and $125,000 end in 2026. Should we just let it expire? Finally, how laser focused should I be on paying off the house? Okay, I love the specificity. Let's just knock these out.
Let's knock them out. Let's take the easy ones first. So the easy one is the life insurance policy.
Yeah.
We have not done our disclaimer.
Oh, right.
We are
Hit that disclaimer, Andrew.
we are not financial professionals. This is our own opinions. You should not take this, or this should not be construed as financial advice. You should seek out a financial professional if you'd like specific financial advice about your situation.
Yes, what he said.
Okay, so in terms of the term life policy, should you let it expire? Yes, you should. I don't know how long the term was, but likely the term would have been probably 15, 20, 25-year term.
Probably for when they had kids. So it might be
Probably when they had kids,
longer.
right. If they were to go out and price new life insurance at their age, it would be astronomically expensive.
Yeah.
And given that they don't have any dependents, the benefit of life insurance is to make sure that your dependents or the people who rely on you are covered. And so there's just not a need for it in this situation.
Well, and ultimately, even if they were able to extend it at the exact same rate, which I don't think they'd be able to,
No,
but it's a
you
small
wouldn't, no.
policy. I mean, that it's not like it's $1 million policy. That
Correct.
policy will maybe after taxes will cover them for 1 to 2 years of the other person's, pension and social security. And so to me, spending $1,200 a year for a $125,000 policy, even if they were 60 and their kids were already out of college, I'd quit that policy. It's not the purpose of life insurance. It's not the core purpose of a term life policy, I think.
Agreed. And then the next one, let's talk about the house.
Yeah. 2.75 interest rate.
Yeah. So this is, I was a little conflicted. I'd be interested to hear your point of view on this. I was a little conflicted on this one, right? They have, first, I love the 15-year mortgage, right? I always recommend people can try and go after that 15-year or at least get a 30 and pay it on a 15-year schedule. But the 2.75 is ridiculously low,
yeah, it's
right?
Nice.
It looks like they may have hit the exact bottom. I have not seen rates much lower than 2.75 on a home mortgage.
Yeah, they probably refied at a really nice time. So good for you guys.
Yep. And so I typically am encouraging people to pay off a mortgage. But in this situation with that kind of a rate, I'm a little bit more torn and on the fence on it.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat, Andrew. I love the feeling of having had my mortgage paid off, and I paid off a low 3% mortgage. At some point I refied and had a really good rate, also 15-year. I like being 40 and I'm 44 now, but I like being in my 40s and having that mortgage paid off. If I were 70 and in their position, I would probably just let it ride. I mean, they owe about $135,000 on it.
Yep.
And at some point, I'm just sort of like,
here's the other aspect that I think is important. Let's play out the scenario of if a spouse passes away.
Yeah.
You'd like to have a bigger cash cushion to be able to make those mortgage payments versus actually, because if suppose they keep paying off the mortgage, they don't have it paid off yet. They still have like a $50,000 balance on it. And suddenly they're having to cover the full mortgage payment with the reduced salary. It's going to be a much tighter pinch. Whereas if they had a cash cushion to simply continue to pay that off and extend it. So in that case, I think because of that, I would probably recommend that they're better off building up a cash cushion. That's the biggest risk to their plan, right? Is because they have such a high Social Security and pension income, the biggest risk to their plan is the spouse passing away. And so having a larger emergency fund to help deal with that, I think is probably more effective than, because they could ultimately be forced out of the house. They could be forced to sell the house if they can't cover the mortgage payment, right?
Yeah, but I was kind of thinking the opposite of that for a second. Like if they pay off the house, they don't have a mortgage payment to worry about, so they're not so worried about.
The problem is that middle ground. It's the piece in the middle where they haven't paid off the mortgage yet. The spouse
but they
dies,
don't have a cash cushion. Yeah,
and they don't have a cash cushion. The mortgage payment on what was the balance? I don't know what their exact mortgage payment was per month. So the balance is $135. I don't know what the initial principal was.
Yeah.
But suppose it was a $250,000 mortgage at 2.75%. The payment isn't huge on that, but still you only have a $5,000 income. And so it could be a little bit more of a pinch. So that's just something to think about.
Yeah, actually, this was in the detail, Andrew. Their monthly mortgage payment is $1,600 but they have been paying, and with their HOA, which is an extra 150, it's 1812. They
Okay.
have been paying an extra 1,000, but they only have to pay 1,800 a month.
Right. Okay. So if you take that 5,000 a month, right, 1812, and they're going to have some taxes on the 5,000, but just on a gross level, it's 36% of the gross income. It's just kind of like on that border of where people are comfortable and uncomfortable, right? You got north of 35% on your housing costs, you're going to start to feel pretty house poor. And so they're going to be in that range if it gets cut.
Yeah. I mean, I think in the end, I land where you do, even for a little bit of like different reasons, but kind of the same high level reasons, I guess, of they're older. Even if something happened to one of them before the other, they might want to downsize. They might want to not have as big of a house that takes, time and energy to maintain. They may want to go live with one of their kids for a while. They may want to, I don't know. They might want to do a lot of different things. They might want a change in lifestyle or something. And so at that point, you're already making some changes. And I just think, I agree. I guess it is for the same reasons, right? I just think that you're kind of hedging your bets either way on something. And I think if I was in a position at that age with a very low interest rate, I would just be okay with, and a shorter runway, arguably. I mean, even if they have another, hopefully you have another healthy, 20 plus years if you want it. But I just think I would lean towards, I wouldn't feel stressed about trying to pay that mortgage off. I'll put it that way. Sounds like you're the same.
Yeah.
So then where would you put that money? Because that was their last question.
Yeah. And so it was unclear exactly how much they had in their emergency fund.
They've got about $100,000 in an emergency fund, arguably, in liquid cash.
Yeah. So call it 10 months of expenses. Right. And given where the interest rates are on a high yield savings account, I mean, they can get a spread just by instead of putting those $1,000 a month extra against the mortgage, they could build up their emergency fund to be higher.
Yeah. They get a 2.25% higher spread if they're in Wealthfront right now, getting 5%.
Yeah. And so I think that probably makes a little bit more sense to build up that cash cushion to be a little bit higher given the age of where they are. And then I would probably also suggest considering the Roth. Well, at their age, the Roth contribution isn't, I mean, their Roth balances are fairly low, but they do have kids. So the benefit of that passing the Roth funds onto the kids could be useful.
Yeah. They have about $1,300 to $1,500 in incremental savings each month based on their expenses and their income. So if you had, let's call it $1,500 to keep a number even, where would you be putting it given they're already sitting on $100,000 of money in cash and then everything else they have is in an IRA or a Roth IRA?
Yeah, so I would probably build up that cash fund to be more like 1 to 2 years of expenses.
Okay.
And then I would probably look to put, and you could either take all of the extra money and put it onto building that up to be that level. And so then you have like complete security that that if your income cuts in half, that you could easily cover your essentially that $120K lifestyle essentially that they have.
Just to clarify, they have an $85,000 lifestyle. You're referencing their income. I just want you to clarify it.
Sorry. Yes. So they would easily be able to cover that 85,000 lifestyle with pulling some additional funds out of cash until that mortgage is paid off, right?
Yeah. Okay. So you build up 2 years worth of cash.
Yeah, I would be thinking about rather than paying that extra $1,000 towards the house, putting it in the high yield savings account and building up the cash.
Okay. Follow-up question that they did not ask, but I want to get them 2 years. So let's say they're a couple years from now and they've built up that emergency fund or their, cash to 2+ years of expenses as a nice buffer. And they're still getting, the best high yield savings account rate they can get. And they still have another, $1,500 a month. Where would you put it in terms of like when at their age, would you be putting it in the market in bonds? Like what would you do with it? CDs, treasury funds, treasury bonds?
Yeah, that's a tough one given kind of where the market is right now and kind of what it's so much easier as a younger investor to just say, hey, I'm investing in the long term. I don't really care too much about the short term. But when you start getting into your 70s, you need to start thinking a little bit more short term, right? And so that's a little bit of a tougher debate. I still think having some money invested in the market and continue to dollar cost, especially, it also depends on what their goals are, right? Do they want to die with zero, or do they want to leave a legacy? Like when you get to that age, that kind of becomes a big question. If you want to leave a legacy, you can start thinking about, well, I'm investing for my kids now, right? And so essentially, I'm not really investing for me to be able to live off of, and especially in their situation, because they are fairly well covered by those pensions. You can almost flip the switch to say, hey, I'm now investing for my kids. And one of the most valuable assets to be able to give to your kids is a Roth IRA. And so I would probably say, after you've built up the cash, that the next best spot to be putting some money in is to contribute to the Roths, because then you get the tax advantage. Now you still have to spend it. The beneficiary still needs to spend the Roth in the 10-year time period, but it is tax free. So
yeah, okay. And then I'm going to answer like a last mini question that was hidden on there. If they should invest, they said like, how do we get started? I'm going to reference back to one of our first episodes, episode 3, how and why to invest in index funds. It's literally as simple as like opening up a brokerage account with Fidelity or Vanguard or whoever you'd like and buying a fund, right? A total market index fund, a bond fund, whatever it is that you want to invest in. And again, it's hard for us to get a little more specific given when you might start investing will be a few years from now after you build up more cash.
And one last thing I'll just say is that they made a comment that, quote, we don't have a clue on whether or not, going back. All of our retirement investments were set up during our working years at our workplace, so they invested for us. I always get very nervous about that because are they still investing for us? And I would always recommend, if you have the opportunity to roll those IRAs or Roth accounts over to your own personally managed brokerage account, those, especially because they've got state pensions, a lot of those state retirement accounts have got very high fees.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And so I would definitely, if they are not under self-management, which it wasn't clear on that, I would definitely look to roll over those accounts so they have management.
And since you're retired and you're no longer an employee, you should have the ability to roll them over into a self-directed IRA or Roth IRA. And so you could open up an account at Fidelity. I'm going to use Fidelity as an example because I've dealt with them personally. I actually have also recently dealt with Vanguard, but Andrew, I told you their customer service was a little bit harder.
I know.
Everything was a little bit harder. But anyways, they will help you. They will walk you through the process of moving those accounts over. They have incredibly helpful customer service agents at both companies, and there's no charge to that assistance. And so I definitely think that's a great point. So extra bonus answer there, Andrew. Thank you. Look, we're answering questions you guys didn't even ask. Look at that. Okay, we're going to jump to the next case study. You ready?
Yep, let's do it.
Next one is Meghan and Harry. They are 38.
I wonder where you got that one from.
Prince Harry. Meghan Markle, you're right. I had to give them... What's funny is I appreciated people who gave their own fake names because when they asked me to use anonymous names, I was like, well, I don't know much about you. What should I call you? I started Googling like famous celebrity couples. And then I was like, yeah, let's go with Meghan and Harry. Okay. 38 and 43. Okay. They live in New Jersey. Annual household spending is $70,000. Annual income is $220,000. That's nice.
Very nice.
Nice spread. And again, we don't really know if that's before or after tax, but either way, that's nice. Mm-hmm. Net worth situation is they have a 401k/403b that has about $488,000 in it, a Roth IRA with $50,000 in it, a high yield savings account, which was kind of like an emergency fund / new home down payment of $248,000. And then we're going to get back to this, Andrew. They have
It's hard to read. It's hard
to read this out loud, guys.
It's really hard.
I know you're a prince, Harry, but I'm sorry. Cash in a traditional bank with an emoji of like the face that I'm making right now. So they know this is not ideal. Of
I would have used the hair on fire. I would have used the hair on fire.
I know. Emoji. Of $379,000. I can't even wait to make this point, Andrew. But
we gotta do the math.
If that was sitting in Wealthfront, that would earn you $1,579 in interest per month.
That is mind blowing.
Let me add that up for a year.
Yeah.
$19,000 in interest a year. So
Yep.
just in the 1 month till this, I mean, this episode may not go out for like a few weeks. I feel like I need to email them. I'm going to give
we
them an
definitely
early recording of this
give
because
them
I
an
don't want them to
early-
lose
yes.
$1,500.
Correct. Or they could just send it to us instead.
Then they've got their home, which is valued around $375,000. They've got blah, blah, blah. The debt left in their home is about $128,000. So overall, their net worth is about $1.4 million. Here's their info and their questions for us. We're very cash heavy, because they
capitalized on the very.
Yeah, they've got like $650,000 to $700,000 in cash. Partly because we have saved up for a house down payment and plan to buy as soon as we find a home. I need to remember that because that's cutting out of their net worth. The other reason is emotion. I feel safe with cash, where minimal in cash fuels fear. I can relate to that. I know we have to push past this. Also important to note, I've become pretty versed in personal finance, or so I think, and my husband just tells me to do whatever I believe is right, which is awesome. That is awesome. But I would like him to be a bit more on board so that the excitement would be there too. I also have high self-doubt. We'd love to retire early, or at least feel more safe than we do. I often feel behind and like we won't get there because we started too late or made too many mistakes along the way. Questions for us. How to invest in a brokerage that is different than a 401k, 403b. Currently, we're in target index funds for our traditional retirement accounts. The original thought was 75% VTSAX and 25% VUG. Could you run a simple retirement calculation to see when we could potentially retire at our current expense rate, and if we increased expenses by about $20,000 per year? This would factor in increased costs when purchasing a home. 529 question mark. Another area that we need to just pull the trigger on. So many options, and then decision fatigue sets in and I freeze because I don't want to make the wrong choice. You know what I forgot to ask in our case study questions was about kids. So some people just naturally like mention their kids, but I didn't have that as a clear question. So like on them, I'm not clear if they already have kids or not. But either way, we got their expenses. So we can make some assumptions. I'm going to go with those expenses. They probably don't have kids, but maybe.
All right. We've got a lot to unpack here.
Let's get rolling.
So let's just let's talk about the cash for a second. Obviously we were joking a little bit, right? We don't want to be too hard on people. I can relate to this because I remember when we were looking for the house that we're in now, we had a large cash position, and it was simply because we were ready to pull the trigger, and it was all sitting in Ally in a high yield savings account, but we had a good chunk of money in cash. And so I can definitely relate to that. I like how they've prioritized that, and they're going to put a big down payment on the house, hopefully not take out too big of a mortgage, or they could potentially want to pay all cash or take out a small mortgage, right? So I think that's all great. And just the overall recommendation is to just move it into our recommendation, which is Wealthfront. You can get the money from Wealthfront very quickly when needed.
Let's clarify. Move all that money. So you should have your 248 account. And I don't know what interest rate you're getting and who you have a high yield savings account. But if you have one with like American Express where you're getting a whole percentage point less than Wealthfront, that's a lot of money to you with this amount of money. So go to somewhere like Wealthfront, use a referral code, make sure you get that extra 0.5 actually matters a lot when you have this much cash sitting there. Move all that money minus a little buffer for paying your bills or whatever, which you can still do through Wealthfront. But anyways, move all that to Wealthfront like right away. When you buy a house, it only takes like less than 48 hours for all that money to move into whatever account you need it into. You can also do a wire directly out of Wealthfront into whatever broker you need to send the money to. So you have plenty of notice on that once you put an offer on a house, and you'll work with your broker on the timing of all that. And so you don't need to be stressed about the timing of that, right? That the house buying process takes longer than moving your money out of a high yield savings account. All
right. So I think we covered that question. Second question is, well, it was their first question. How to invest in brokerage that is different from 401k. Currently, we're invested in target date index funds for our traditional retirement accounts. So just a thought on that. It's super easy to open up a regular taxable brokerage account with Fidelity or Vanguard are our two preferred, and you can set it up. I'm a huge fan of just doing an automated investment. Clearly, with your income and your expenses, you have a significant surplus at the end of each month. And so, I'm sure you're prioritizing your cash for that house purchase, but kind of decide how much cash you want to have for the house purchase, and then focus on investing some of that remainder in some automated contributions to a taxable brokerage account. And that's easy to set up. And then in terms of the 401ks that you've got with your employer for your traditional retirement accounts, we won't get into the details of which specific index fund, as we are not financial professionals, but a broad-based index fund, but like a VTSAX or any of the other hundreds that are offered, we definitely would support that.
And we just recently covered in another episode why we don't love target date funds. So I'll put a link in the show notes to that episode. If I could remember it off the top of my head, I would say it, but the link will be in the show notes.
All right. So then the second question, which is, could you run a simple retirement calculation for us? You can certainly do some napkin math, but I will say that the rudimentary napkin math, we would really need to understand a little bit more for it to be more accurate in terms of, are you planning how big of a house you want to purchase? What would your assets look like after the house purchase? Because they're not the house wouldn't be income producing. So things like that. But in general, this is the way to kind of think through the calculations and the math from a simple perspective. So the first thing you would do is you take your income and your net income, right? We don't know whether you've listed gross or net, but you take your net income and then you subtract out your annual expenses. You had 70K. You said you wanted to increase that to about 90K from 70K. And so just for rough math, let's just think for a minute that your 220 is gross and maybe you're netting 180 and you have 90K of expenses. And so you have a savings rate of 50%. So you now have a 90K surplus. And so if you were to invest, and maybe just to make the math a little bit rounder. So let's just say you're going to increase your expenses to 100K, right? So if you want to have a 100K lifestyle, and if you wanted to early retire, a lot of people use the 4% rule, which is 25 times your expenses. So that would be $2.5 million. That's more of a traditional retirement. I'd like to, if you're going to be retiring in your 40s, probably something more like, let me do the quick math here.
Sorry, 2.5 million. 90,000 at 3.5% withdrawal rate should be 2.5 million.
Yeah, do it at 100,000. At 100,000, it's.
I did 100,000 divided by 3.5%, 2.8 million.
Yes. Okay. So let's just say for a more conservative early retirement number that you're going to do a 3.5% withdrawal rate rather than the 4% withdrawal rate. So that is going to be 2.9 million on 100,000 of expenses, right?
Yeah.
And
that includes their 401k. That includes that's overall net worth.
Right.
Well, it depends how you think about it, but yes, that's twice what they have now. Right, if we take some rough estimates here. So
you would say that they are approximately 50% of the way there, right?
Yeah.
In terms of excluding that includes you're counting that as the total net worth.
Yeah, I'm counting that as their total net worth.
Correct. So total net worth is today they're about half of that. Now the house is the big X factor in this, right? Because the house, while yes, it is considered in the number, it is not an income producing asset. It's not,
it's not like a liquid asset. You want to stay in that house, then
correct, right? And so what you can do is ideally you would want to get to a liquid asset base of somewhere between 2.5 and 2.8 million, right? Would be fairly safe.
But if that number freaks you out, keep in mind Andrew has increased your annual spending by 30,000, right? Mm-hmm. Being incredibly conservative. And he's gone down to like a 3.5% withdrawal rate versus a 4%. So there's all these levers you can pull, right?
Yeah.
Like just as an example, I'm going to do 70,000 at a 4% withdrawal rate. That's 1.7 million. That's a lot. I mean, that's $1 million off. And I'm just showing that as an example.
Exactly. And I love to do I was working with a client today that I did that exact same scenario where I basically just showed the two biggest levers are what's the market going to return, and then what is your spending going to
how
do,
fast are you going to spend it?
and how fast you're going to spend, and then what essentially is your estimated withdrawal rate, right?
Yeah.
And to cover those expenses. And so, yeah, it becomes a wide range. And so this is why these are always very rough estimates, but that gives you a range of the target you would need to go. Then you would need to plug in, okay, if I have call it an 80K surplus, if I invest $80,000 per year at 5 or 6, 7%, whichever you decided, how long does it take me to achieve the 2.8 million, right?
Yeah. And this is where we move to the like tough love portion of the answer, right? Because I'm making some assumptions just based on your question of like, could you run a simple calc to see when we could potentially retire at our current expense rate, blah, blah, blah. So it depends. This is like, it all depends on what you want to do. But if you want to get to retiring as fast as possible, which again, I'm not saying you want to do, but here are the things that you might want to do given we know a bit about your scenario. And every dollar counts here. So I'm going to name like little things, big things, right? You want to get out of those target date index funds in your 401k. You're paying extra fees, expense ratio fees that could be in the neighborhood of 1% to 2% potentially. And so that's taken a drag off everything. You want to consider, I know you're saving a bunch of money for a house, but if that money wasn't about to go into a house, you'd be sitting on a cash cushion of 650 to 700 grand, and some percentage of which you could put into the market and would grow pretty heavily over time, given some time in the market. And so you got to decide, do you want to put that into a house, or that is while it's an appreciating asset, it's not one you're going to sell. It's one you're going to live in, and you're essentially inflating your lifestyle. And you even said that. You said, assume that we want to increase our expenses by about $20,000 a year because that would factor in the increased cost of purchasing this new home. So decide if you want to do that. Is it worth it to you? You may have already decided that, but you will not retire as quickly if you decide to upgrade your home. That is like black and white.
Yeah, the home is definitely the biggest decision point here, and will have the largest effect on when they could retire. And that's why I think they need to think long and hard about what size home, how much they want to spend on the home, because that is going to be the number one driver of the lifestyle.
Yeah. And they might choose to buy a bigger, it might be fine.
And they may say, hey, I'm okay
working longer.
Liz has talked about this, right? Liz has been in the exact same situation where Liz has said, hey, this is co-host Liz. She bought a much more expensive house, and she knew that she was going to work longer in order to support that, and she was very happy.
Yeah, she was okay. That was an intentional trade-off.
It was an intentional trade-off, right?
And she also knows she might sell that house, right? She's talked about being, she said this on the internet, right? So yeah, it's totally up to you, and it's a trade-off. So let's hit a couple other points here, though, Andrew.
Yep.
So I heard Megan say I love that like Harry lets her do everything and is like, just trust her. That's great. There's nothing wrong with that if everybody's comfortable with, the relationship. Though I do like that she's kind of like, she'd like him to get a little bit more excited about it. I think a couple things there though. You said you often feel behind. I don't think you should feel behind. Like when you talk about just your overall finances and net worth, right? You guys are in a very solid position, right? I do think you could save more for retirement. So I think you should be considering maxing out your 401ks because it'll reduce your taxable income. There's a lot of benefits to doing that. I don't think you're currently doing that. I'm just going off the amount in your 401ks. So I would consider maxing those out, but I don't think you should feel behind. I'm not telling you how to feel. I'm just saying like you guys are in a very good position. And I think the way you pull your partner into getting a little bit more excited and on board with some of the financial stuff is the conversation Andrew and I just had about like the levers and the trade-offs, right? Of like, have a really thoughtful discussion and say, hey, this is a big decision for us. Like, do we want to invest this much more in a home? And maybe we both do, but just know that means we're going to work longer, right? And what is more important to us in, 5 to 6 to 10 years? Because we could get there if we didn't, we could get there a lot faster if we didn't upgrade our home at this point. And so that to me is a great way to like pull him in and build some excitement, because you were in a point where I think you both have a lot of control over what the next, you have control over what the entire future looks like. But in particular, the next 5 to 10 years, there's some pretty big levers you could pull or not pull. And that should really be a joint decision that you guys make together. And so, or just that that one of you goes part-time. It sounds like you do have kids. And so if you're thinking about a 529. And so I just think it gives you a lot of options. Like even if you don't want full retirement, you might just want to get to financial independence because you want to have a lot of options and flexibility in your life, which is an amazing feeling to have and point to get to. So you should feel good about where you're at. And I would try to, pull him in to get him a little bit more excited about it and do that around some of the more long-term strategic planning, because that might be a good point to bring him in on.
Yeah. And then let's hit the 529 question, right? So I love this question. They say on the 529, another area that we just need to pull the trigger. So many options and decision fatigue sets in, and I freeze because I don't want to make the wrong choice. This is something that Maggie, I know you can relate with. Yeah. Don't be afraid about making the wrong decision on this. Just the fact that you're thinking about a 529 is you have already made the right decision.
Well, the wrong decision would be to do nothing.
Correct.
So just do something and you'll be 80%. Like you really can't go wrong. Like,
yeah. And so when it comes to the 529, my recommendation is always open account on the month your children are born. Most 529s have a minimum deposit of like $25 per month. And you just start with that and put it into a broad-based index fund. And if you can contribute more than the $25 a month, fantastic. But just start contributing whatever amount you can based off of your income. You should be able to, if you start early, you should have a very strongly funded 529 by the time your kids are ready to be in college, and you let the magic of compound interest do its thing.
The other comment, I'm making some assumptions in here, but when you say so many options and the decision fatigue sits in, I'm assuming you mean options on like even where to open a 529, not which funds to put it in, because the which funds is an easy one. Find the closest thing to a total market index fund, not a target date fund, and put it in that. And so that's what we do, and that's our advice at least. But also, if you don't like that, put it in a target date fund, whatever, put it in something. And so, but the which state, you guys, we happen to know you're in New Jersey, but I'm going to make this question a little bit more broad to apply to anyone in any state who might be stuck on a 529. If your state is one of the many states that allows your contributions into a 529 plan to be tax deductible, go with your state's plan, because you can't deduct money. Like if Wealthfront offered 529 plans and they were run out of Nevada, but I'm in Georgia, I can still open a 529 in Nevada. That's fine, but it's not tax deductible in Georgia. So the only money that's tax deductible in Georgia is if I open, Georgia state has an actual 529 plan. So you guys are in New Jersey. It took me 30 seconds to Google. New Jersey allows residents to deduct up to $10,000 in contributions to the NJ Best 529 savings plan per year if your gross income is $200,000 or less, which theirs is not at this point, right? I'm going back to their
they may get some deductions for children, right? So they might
be just shy of that. And I'm not going into like the details of everything in New Jersey. I literally did a quick
at a baseline. We know New Jersey has a plan. Contribute to that plan, put it in a broad-based index fund, open the accounts for your children when they're born.
Yeah, and that's where I'd always start. Start in your state's fund. Most, like 99% of 529 plans that are through one of your state funds, there's not fees on it. It doesn't cost you anything. There's only fees on the funds you might invest it in, but to open an actual plan doesn't cost you anything. And you can get links that you can send to friends and family. They can make donations for gifts. I'm a big fan of that. Okay, that was a lot, but hopefully I think we hit all of their questions.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's 2 more case studies in the books. I think we're 4 case studies in. And again, we'll keep listening to y'all's feedback if you like these, and we'll try to do one of these. Maybe like every other episode we do, Andrew, will be case studies. Okay. Anything you want to throw in?
No, that was fun. I like these discussions.
Yeah, I think they're fun. I actually think it's fascinating to see other people's financial situation and like age and location and just even like what their houses cost. And it's kind of fun to...
Yeah, personal finance is such a taboo topic that no one ever talks about it, right? And so being able to look at how people are approaching it, and in the 4 case studies we've done, they have all been wildly different.
Yeah.
Right. And personal finance is personal. Everyone's situation is different. And it's why you can't necessarily take a completely one size fits all approach. Yes, there are certain themes and things that you can do, like a 529 but when you get into the intricacies of when am I going to retire? How much house can I afford? Do I want to leave a legacy? Do I not want to leave a legacy? I want to die with zero. I don't want to die with zero.
How much risk do I feel comfortable with?
Correct. What do we think the market's going to do? Do I have children? Do I not have children? Like all these different, like there's all these different scenarios that play into it. And so, but it's good to debate them. There's never a perfect answer in this, right?
And our answers aren't perfect. So
maybe the only perfect answer is not to leave money in a traditional bank account.
Or to not invest in, to not get started, right? Like I always say this, like it's 80-20, right? 80% is just doing something. You trying to optimize the final 20%. Like,
I would even say it's 95%.
You're right.
95, right? The last 5%.
Yes. Open a 529, max out your 401k, you just don't stress about, is it a 401k or is it a Roth 401k? Like just get money in a 401k and you want as long as you can in the market.
One of the reasons why you and I decided to start doing these case studies was because there's only so many topics in personal finance that we can talk about, because you sometimes run out of the standard 80%.
Yeah.
And so getting into the some of the minutia of the 20% that we hope is, not every case study is going to be relatable to all of the listeners, but we hope that there are pieces of these case studies that people can relate to. And we're able to touch on a broader set of topics within these case studies than maybe one specific topic that we did on one specific episode.
Yeah, totally agree. And again, we're telling you what we would do. Right. So this is
only our opinions.
Our opinion. You do not have to follow it. There's a lot of nuance and context we don't have from what you shared.
And we will probably get some disagreements.
Yeah. And we're not in your, like, we don't know how big your family is. We don't know the quality of life change you would get from moving houses. There's a ton of things that we don't know anyways. And so like you got to make the decision on your own, and you got to feel good about what decision you make. But it is fun to kind of see something and then kind of give you our take. And it's helpful to get people's take, because you're right, Andrew. It shouldn't be, but finance is often a taboo topic. And so I think it's pretty fun actually to like see what other people are doing and talk about it and debate it and kind of share different ideas and see what sticks and see how you feel about stuff you hear us say. And it is up to you. So with that, I think we can wrap it up. Thank you guys. We always appreciate you listening and spending some time with us. If you've enjoyed this episode, we'd love it if you want to give us a written review on Apple Podcasts, or you can leave us a rating on Spotify. We really appreciate it.
We also encourage you to share this episode with a friend or family member to encourage ongoing discussions about money. You can also subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you have thoughts or questions, we'd love to hear from you, and you can leave a voicemail or text us at 404-981-3370 or hit us up on Instagram.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks, Maggie.
Bye.
Bye.